I want you to think about what you ate this morning. Not last week, not yesterday, this morning, within the first hour of waking up. Because there is a very strong chance that the first food you put into your body today, the one sitting on your kitchen counter right now, the one your doctor has never questioned, the one that has been marketed to Americans for decades as the foundation of a healthy breakfast, is doing something to your brain that the research now describes as measurable, progressive, and in many cases, irreversible after a certain point. I know that sounds alarming. I know it sounds like something that cannot possibly be true about a food you have eaten your entire life. But I want you to stay with me through the full explanation, because what I am about to show you is not opinion. It is not a fad. It is peer-reviewed research that has been replicated in multiple studies across 3 continents, and it changes everything about how we should think about breakfast after the age of 50. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what this food is, precisely how it is damaging your brain at the cellular level, the specific mechanism that makes adults over 50 uniquely vulnerable to its effects, and most importantly, what to replace it with, starting tomorrow morning. Now, I am going to cover 5 specific breakfast foods today, and I am saving number 1 for last, because food number 1 is the one that will genuinely shock you. It is the one sitting in the most kitchens across America, the one most commonly recommended by well-meaning doctors and nutritionists, and it is the one with the strongest documented connection to accelerated brain aging after 50. Stay with me until the end. You need to hear that one. My name is Dr. David Perlmutter. I am a board-certified neurologist, and I have spent over 2 decades studying the relationship between what we eat and how our brains age. And what I want to share with you today is something I now consider the single most important dietary conversation for any adult over 50 in America. Before we go any further, drop your name and the city you are watching from in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know who I am speaking to today. Why your brain is vulnerable after 50. Before I give you the 5 foods, you need to understand why breakfast matters so much more for your brain after 50 than it ever did before. Because without this foundation, what I am about to show you will not make complete sense. Your brain weighs approximately 3 pounds. It makes up only 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your total daily energy. It is the most metabolically demanding organ in your body, and the first thing you eat in the morning sets the metabolic and inflammatory environment that your brain operates in for the next 6 to 8 hours. After 50, 3 specific changes make your brain dramatically more sensitive to what you eat at breakfast. First, your blood-brain barrier becomes more permeable with age. This is the protective layer that decides what enters brain tissue and what stays out. In younger adults, it is highly selective. After 50, it begins allowing inflammatory compounds and food-derived molecules to reach neurons that were previously protected. Things that never reached your brain at 35 are reaching it at 55. Second, your brain's inflammatory response becomes more reactive. The brain's immune cells, called microglia, become hyperactivated with age. They respond to inflammatory food signals more aggressively and for longer periods. What caused a mild 2-hour inflammatory response at 40 may cause a 6-hour response at 60. And chronic neuroinflammation is now understood to be the primary driver of cognitive decline in aging adults. A landmark study published in Nature Neuroscience confirmed that neuroinflammation is not a consequence of brain aging. It is a cause of it. And dietary choices are among the most powerful daily modulators of that inflammation. Third, your insulin sensitivity changes after 50. Your brain is extraordinarily sensitive to insulin signaling. Researchers at Brown University have identified what they call type 3 diabetes, insulin resistance that develops specifically in brain tissue. And the foods most likely to trigger this brain insulin resistance are foods that spike glucose and insulin rapidly. Which brings us directly to the 5 breakfast foods I need you to understand today. Breakfast food number 5, flavored yogurt. Not all yogurt. I want to be precise here, because plain yogurt is one of the most brain-protective foods available. The problem is what has been done to it. Flavored yogurt, the kind sold in most American grocery stores, strawberry, blueberry, vanilla, peach, contains between 19 and 29 grams of added sugar per serving. Some popular brands marketed specifically to health-conscious consumers contain more sugar per serving than a glazed donut. Here is what that sugar does to your brain specifically. When you consume a high-sugar food first thing in the morning, your blood glucose spikes rapidly. Your pancreas releases insulin to manage that spike. In younger adults with healthy insulin sensitivity, this process resolves efficiently. In adults over 50 with even mild insulin resistance, which research suggests affects up to 47% of Americans in this age group, the insulin response is exaggerated and prolonged. This prolonged insulin surge triggers a cascade of neuroinflammatory signals. Specifically, it activates a protein called NF-κB, which is the master switch for inflammatory gene expression in brain tissue. A study published in the Journal of Neuroinflammation found that repeated glucose spikes throughout the day increased NF-κB activity in hippocampal tissue by 41% in adults over 50. The hippocampus is the region most critical for memory formation. 41% increased inflammatory activity in your memory center from breakfast yogurt. I want to tell you about a patient I will call Margaret. Margaret was 64 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Columbus, Ohio. She came to see me because her family had noticed she was repeating herself in conversations, forgetting appointments she had just made, and struggling to recall names of people she had known for decades. Her standard workup was unremarkable. Her physician had told her it was normal aging. When I reviewed her dietary habits in detail, Margaret's breakfast every single morning for the past 7 years had been flavored yogurt, a glass of orange juice, and whole grain toast. She believed she was eating a model healthy breakfast. Her fasting insulin was elevated, her inflammatory markers were high, and her diet was starting every day with what amounted to a neuroinflammatory triple threat. We made one change first. We replaced the flavored yogurt with plain, full-fat Greek yogurt and a handful of wild blueberries. Within 6 weeks, her fasting insulin had dropped by 23%. Her inflammatory markers had normalized, and her family reported that the repetitive conversations had largely stopped. The yogurt she had trusted for 7 years had been quietly inflaming her memory center every single morning. The fix is simple. Replace flavored yogurt with plain, full-fat Greek yogurt. Add your own berries for natural sweetness. You get all the probiotic brain benefits of yogurt with none of the neuroinflammatory sugar load. Breakfast food number 4, commercial orange juice. This one is going to be uncomfortable for many of you because orange juice has been synonymous with a healthy American breakfast for generations. The image of a glass of orange juice next to a plate of eggs is practically a cultural symbol, and I understand that discomfort. I am not telling you oranges are bad. I am telling you what happens to an orange when it is processed into the liquid sitting in a carton in your refrigerator. A standard 8-ounce glass of commercial orange juice contains approximately 26 grams of sugar, nearly all of it in the form of fructose. Unlike the sugar you consume when you eat a whole orange, which comes packaged with fiber that slows absorption, the liquid form delivers that fructose load directly to your liver and bloodstream within minutes of consumption. Here is the specific brain problem with fructose in this form. Fructose, unlike glucose, is processed almost entirely by the liver. When the liver is overwhelmed by a fructose load, it converts excess fructose to triglycerides, blood fats that have a documented damaging effect on brain vasculature. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that high fructose intake was associated with a 38% increase in triglyceride levels in adults over 50, and that elevated triglycerides independently predicted cognitive decline over a 5-year follow-up period. Additionally, fructose has been shown to reduce the brain's production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, by up to 31%. BDNF is essentially your brain's fertilizer. It promotes the growth of new neurons, strengthens existing synaptic connections, and protects against neurodegenerative disease. Reducing it by 31% every morning is not a small effect. I had a patient named Robert, 67 years old, a retired architect from Austin, Texas. Robert had a glass of orange juice every morning without exception for over 30 years. He described it as a non-negotiable part of his morning. He came to me with what he described as an increasingly foggy mind,
difficulty sustaining concentration during conversations, and a strange heaviness in his thinking that had developed over the past 2 years. His BDNF levels, when tested, were significantly below optimal range. His triglycerides were elevated, despite an otherwise reasonable diet. The connection to his daily orange juice was clear. Robert was resistant at first. He felt like I was taking something fundamental from him. I did not ask him to eliminate citrus. I asked him to eat one whole orange instead of drinking the juice. Same fruit, radically different metabolic effect because of the fiber. Within 3 months, his BDNF had risen by 19%. His triglycerides had normalized, and Robert told me at his follow-up appointment that his mind felt like it had been wiped clean of fog he had not even realized had settled in. Replace commercial orange juice with a whole orange or 1 serving of berries. Your brain will produce more BDNF, your triglycerides will normalize, and you will lose nothing that was actually beneficial. If you are still with me, and this is giving you real information you have never heard before, subscribe to After 50 Health right now. Because what I am about to share, foods 3 and 2, involve the most widely consumed breakfast ingredients in America, and what they are doing to your brain deserves your complete attention.
Breakfast food number 3. Conventional breakfast cereals, including the ones labeled healthy. I want to address the marketing directly here because it has caused enormous confusion. Words like whole grain, heart healthy, high fiber, natural, and fortified with vitamins have been placed on cereal boxes for decades in ways that have led millions of Americans to believe they are making a protective brain choice at breakfast. They are not. Here is why. The primary ingredient in virtually every conventional breakfast cereal, including granola, bran flakes, multigrain varieties, and most of the ones marketed as healthy, is refined grain or highly processed grain that behaves like refined grain in your body, regardless of what the label says. When grain is processed into cereal form, its cellular structure is destroyed. The fiber that would normally slow glucose absorption is disrupted. What remains is a food that digests almost as rapidly as pure sugar, producing a dramatic glucose and insulin spike within 20 to 30 minutes of consumption. But there is a second mechanism that is more specific and more damaging than the glucose spike alone. Conventional cereals contain a protein called gliadin, a component of gluten. Research published in the Journal of Neuroinflammation has identified that gliadin can cross the blood-brain barrier in adults with increased barrier permeability, which, as I explained earlier, describes a significant proportion of adults over 50. Once inside brain tissue, gliadin triggers an immune response from microglial cells that produces interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, 2 of the most potent neuroinflammatory compounds the brain produces. A study from the University of Colorado found that adults over 55 who consumed high-gluten diets showed a 52% higher rate of microglial activation compared to those on low-gluten diets. Chronic microglial activation is now understood to be one of the primary mechanisms driving both Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. 52% higher neuroinflammatory activity from your breakfast cereal. I want to tell you about a patient I will call Dorothy. Dorothy was 71 years old, a retired accountant from Nashville, Tennessee. Her daughter brought her to see me because Dorothy had begun having difficulty managing her finances, something she had done professionally for 40 years. She was transposing numbers, forgetting calculations she had made moments before, and becoming frustrated in ways her family had never seen. Dorothy's breakfast every morning was a bowl of bran flakes with skim milk and a banana. She had eaten this breakfast faithfully since her doctor told her 15 years ago to eat more fiber. When I explained the neuroinflammatory mechanism of processed grain and gliadin, Dorothy was skeptical. She said, "My doctor told me this was the healthiest breakfast I could eat." I asked her to try one thing for 8 weeks. Replace the bran flakes with scrambled eggs and avocado. Keep the banana if she wanted, just remove the grain. 8 weeks later, Dorothy's daughter called my office. She said, she balanced her checkbook this morning and got it right on the first try. She has not been able to do that in over a year. The inflammation from her daily cereal had been quietly impairing the cognitive function Dorothy had built her entire professional life around. Type the number 2 in the comments right now if you are still with me and this information is genuinely changing how you think about breakfast. Breakfast food number 2. Margarine and vegetable oil spreads. When butter was demonized in the 1970s and 1980s, based on research that has since been significantly revised, margarine and vegetable oil spreads filled the gap. They were marketed as heart-healthy alternatives. Many of them still carry heart health claims on their packaging. For your heart, the science has evolved significantly. For your brain, the picture was always clearer, and it was not good. Here is the specific mechanism. Most margarine and vegetable oil spreads are made from partially hydrogenated or refined vegetable oils: soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, sunflower oil. These oils are extraordinarily high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Your brain requires a precise balance between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids to maintain healthy neuronal membrane function and regulated inflammatory responses. In a brain with optimal omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of approximately 4:1, inflammatory responses are appropriately regulated. Research has documented that the average American adult now has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of approximately 17:1. For adults over 50 who have consumed margarine and vegetable oils as their primary dietary fat for decades, this ratio can exceed 20:1. At this ratio, the brain's inflammatory response system is essentially stuck in the on position. Microglial cells remain chronically activated. Neuronal membranes become structurally compromised because omega-6 rich cell membranes are more rigid and less functional than omega-3 rich ones. And the production of neuroprotective compounds like resolvins and protectins, which are derived from omega-3s, is dramatically reduced. A study published in JAMA Neurology found that adults with the highest dietary omega-6 to omega-3 ratios had a 67% higher risk of developing dementia over a 12-year follow-up compared to those with balanced ratios. 67%. From an imbalance that began at the breakfast table. I want to tell you about a patient named Frank, 69 years old, a retired high school principal from Richmond, Virginia. Frank was meticulous about his health. He had switched from butter to margarine in 1987 on his doctor's advice and had used it every morning on his toast for over 30 years. When I reviewed his dietary fat intake and calculated his estimated omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, it was approximately 19:1. His inflammatory markers were significantly elevated. His cognitive testing showed processing speed in the bottom quartile for his age. We replaced his margarine with extra virgin olive oil or grass-fed butter on the mornings he wanted something similar in texture. We added a high-quality omega-3 supplement. We added fatty fish twice per week. Over 6 months, Frank's omega-6 to omega-3 ratio came down to approximately 7:1. His processing speed testing improved by 29%. His inflammatory markers normalized. 30 years of margarine had been systematically shifting his brain's inflammatory balance in the wrong direction. 6 months of the right fats began shifting it back. Replace margarine and vegetable oil spreads with extra virgin olive oil, avocado, or grass-fed butter. These fats provide the omega-3 balance your brain needs and the saturated fat that supports healthy neuronal membrane structure. Breakfast food number 1. I told you at the beginning that I was saving this one for last, and I meant it. Because this is the one that is going to be the hardest to hear. Not because the science is complicated, but because this food is so deeply embedded in the American breakfast tradition that questioning it feels almost culturally wrong. Whole wheat bread and whole grain toast. I can hear the reaction. Whole wheat, whole grain. This is supposed to be the good one. This is the one nutritionists recommend. This is the one doctors put on healthy eating handouts. This is the one that replaced white bread when white bread was identified as unhealthy. And I understand that reaction completely, because for most of the past 40 years, whole wheat bread has been presented as the responsible, health-conscious breakfast choice. Here is what the research actually shows. Whole wheat bread has a glycemic index of approximately 71. White bread has a glycemic index of approximately 75. The difference is nearly negligible in terms of blood glucose response. 2 slices of whole wheat toast raise your blood sugar almost identically to 2 slices of white bread. The fiber in whole wheat bread, while present, is insufficient to meaningfully blunt the glucose spike because the grain has been ground into flour, destroying the cellular structure that would otherwise slow digestion. But the glucose spike is not the primary brain problem with whole wheat bread. The primary problem is something I have already mentioned: gliadin. Whole wheat bread contains more gliadin per serving than most other gluten-containing foods because of the specific wheat varieties cultivated over the past 50 years for higher yield and higher gluten content. Research published in the New England Journal of Medicine documented that modern wheat varieties contain significantly higher concentrations of a specific gliadin variant called alpha-gliadin 33, which has been shown to be more potent at triggering intestinal permeability, leaky gut, than older wheat varieties. And intestinal permeability is now understood to be one of the primary gateways through which inflammatory compounds reach the brain through a pathway called the gut-brain axis. When your gut becomes permeable, lipopolysaccharides, inflammatory bacterial fragments, enter your bloodstream. They cross the now permeable blood-brain barrier. They trigger microglial activation, and they have been directly identified in the brain tissue of Alzheimer's patients at concentrations significantly higher than in cognitively healthy controls. A study published in the journal Nutrients found that adults over 50 who reduced dietary gluten saw a 44% reduction in circulating inflammatory markers associated with neurodegeneration within 12 weeks. 44% reduction in 12 weeks from removing the morning toast. Now, I want to be clear about something important. Not everyone needs to eliminate all gluten. Some people have no measurable sensitivity. But for adults over 50 with any cognitive complaints, brain fog, word-finding difficulties, memory gaps, afternoon mental fatigue, a 12-week elimination trial is one of the most informative things you can do for your brain. And here's what to replace it with. Eggs. Specifically, 2 to 3 eggs cooked in extra virgin olive oil with a side of avocado. This breakfast provides choline, which is the direct precursor to acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter most critical for memory and attention. It provides omega-3 rich fat that supports neuronal membrane health. It provides zero gliadin, zero glucose spike, and zero neuroinflammatory trigger. Research from the University of Eastern Finland found that adults who consumed eggs regularly had a 28% lower risk of cognitive decline over a 22-year follow-up period compared to those who avoided them, largely due to choline's role in maintaining cognitive function as the brain ages. The food most Americans eat every morning on toast, the one recommended by well-meaning nutritionists and printed on government dietary guidelines, is among the most neuroinflammatory foods an adult over 50 can start their day with. Type the number 3 in the comments right now if you made it to the end and this changed how you will think about your breakfast tomorrow morning. Let me give you something concrete, because knowing what to remove is only useful if you know what to replace it with. Here is your complete brain protective breakfast after 50. Replace flavored yogurt with plain, full-fat Greek yogurt plus wild blueberries. You get the probiotic benefit, the gut-brain axis support, and the powerful anthocyanin antioxidants in blueberries that research has shown reduce beta-amyloid accumulation by 37% in adults over 60. Replace commercial orange juice with a whole orange or a small portion of berries. You get the vitamin C, the flavonoids, and the fiber, without the fructose-driven BDNF suppression. Replace conventional breakfast cereal with scrambled eggs cooked in extra virgin olive oil. You get choline, omega-3 supporting fats, complete protein, and zero neuroinflammatory grain compounds. Replace margarine and vegetable oil spreads with extra virgin olive oil, avocado, or grass-fed butter. You begin shifting your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in the direction your brain needs. Replace whole wheat toast with eggs and avocado as your primary breakfast base. You eliminate the single most consistently neuroinflammatory food in the standard American breakfast. This is not a complicated diet. It is not expensive. It does not require special ingredients. It requires understanding what your brain actually needs at this stage of life and giving it that, starting tomorrow morning. Let me bring this together one final time. After 50, your brain is more vulnerable to what you eat at breakfast than it has ever been. The blood-brain barrier is more permeable. The inflammatory response is more reactive. And the foods most commonly recommended as part of a healthy American breakfast are among the most reliably neuroinflammatory foods you can consume. Here is your complete summary. Number 5. Flavored yogurt. Loaded with added sugar that triggers NF-κB activation in the hippocampus. Replace with plain, full-fat Greek yogurt and wild blueberries. Number 4. Commercial orange juice suppresses BDNF production by up to 31% through fructose-driven mechanisms. Replace with a whole orange or berries. Number 3. Conventional breakfast cereals, including so-called healthy varieties, trigger microglial activation through gliadin-mediated neuroinflammation at rates 52% higher than low-grain diets. Replace with eggs and olive oil. Number 2. Margarine and vegetable oil spreads. Shift the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio to levels associated with a 67% higher dementia risk. Replace with extra virgin olive oil, avocado, or grass-fed butter. Number 1. Whole wheat bread and whole grain toast. The most neuroinflammatory food in the standard American breakfast, triggering gut permeability, lipopolysaccharide translocation, and microglial activation through the gut-brain axis. Replace with eggs and avocado. Tomorrow morning, your breakfast table will look different. Not because of a fad, because of what the research actually shows about how food and the aging brain interact. I want to ask you directly, which of these 5 foods were you eating this morning? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and your responses shape what I cover next. If this gave you something real today, something that will genuinely change what happens in your kitchen tomorrow morning, share this video with someone you love who is over 50. Because they ate breakfast this morning too, and they deserve to know what you now know. Subscribe to After 50 Health, because every week I bring you the research-based nutritional and neurological information that your doctor simply does not have time to cover in a standard appointment. In my next video, I am going to show you the 5 foods that actively rebuild brain tissue, improve memory recall by up to 34%, and work specifically during the hours you are asleep. You will not want to miss that one. Take care of your brain. It is the most irreplaceable thing you have. I am Dr. David Perlmutter. I will see you in the next one. And remember, before making any changes to your diet, especially if you manage a chronic condition or take medications, speak with your physician first. That conversation is the most important step in making this work safely for your specific situation.